My name is Tiffany Hart, and I was 31 years old when I learned that the person you love can casually dismantle you in front of strangers and call it honesty. From the outside, my life looked clean and well constructed. I founded my logistics company right after college. No investors, no safety net, just grit and a spreadsheet. I updated obsessively at 2 in the morning. We weren't a Fortune 500 operation, but we were real. 12 million in annual revenue, 65 employees, long-term hospital contracts, stability, substance. I thought that was enough. I had been engaged to Sean Chen, 32, for 6 months. We'd been together for 3 years. He worked in fashion retail management and had always been aspirational. He liked labels. He liked being seen. He liked the idea of success more than the work behind it. I told myself that balance was healthy, that my grounded practicality complemented his ambition. The first crack appeared at his friend Tanya Walker's engagement party. It was one of those upscale rooftop events where everyone pretends not to check each other's watches and shoes. Champagne flowed freely and Sean drank more than usual. We were standing with 3 other couples when the conversation drifted inevitably toward careers. Someone asked Sean how he felt being engaged to a company founder. He smiled, tilted his glass toward me, and said, "Tiffany's great. She really is. But sometimes I miss being with someone truly ambitious." The air shifted. "My ex-girlfriend, Samantha Blake," he continued, laughing lightly, as if this were charming. Now she had drive. She was going places. I felt every eye flick toward me. I smiled. "She worked in high finance," he added. "That kind of hunger, it's rare. Not everyone can handle that lifestyle." There it was. The pity. Soft, public, deliberate. Someone mentioned my company landing a major hospital network contract. Sean waved it off with a shrug. "It's cute, but it's not exactly high finance, is it?" I excused myself and went to the bar. What Sean didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was that Samantha Blake had applied to work for me 3 months earlier. I remembered her name instantly when I'd seen the resume. 2 years at Goldman Sachs. Analyst, then 3 startups, all failed. 8 months unemployed. At the time I'd passed. That night, holding a glass of wine I didn't finish, I made a different decision. Monday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that always settles over my office before the city fully wakes up. I liked being there early before the phones started ringing, before the warehouse floor buzzed to life, before people needed answers from me. That morning, I needed the silence. I closed my office door and stared at the resume on my desk. Samantha Blake, 2 years at Goldman Sachs. Analyst. That was the line Sean had loved repeating whenever he talked about her, always with a reverent tone like her job title was proof of her worth, and by extension, proof of what he believed ambition should look like. Below that line, though, the resume told a much quieter story. 3 startups in less than 2 years. Each one folded. Each departure explained away with vague phrases about market conditions and strategic pivots. 8 months unemployed. At the time she'd applied, I'd passed without a second thought. I didn't need another operations manager, and her experience felt scattered more narrative than substance. But now with Sean's voice still echoing in my head, truly ambitious, I found myself picking up the phone. "Rachel," I said, when my HR director answered, "do you remember a candidate named Samantha Blake applied for operations manager a few months back?" There was a pause as she pulled up the file. "Yes, former finance background. We didn't move forward. I want to interview her." Another pause, longer this time. "Really, her experience." "I want to meet her," I repeated calmly. "Thursday, 2 p.m. Rachel didn't argue. She rarely did. By Thursday afternoon, I had already made up my mind about one thing. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to explain myself. And I certainly wasn't going to act emotional. That would come later in private where no one could weaponize it against me. Samantha arrived 5 minutes early. She wore a blazer that had once been expensive but had clearly lived a long life. Her heels were scuffed. Her smile, though, was polished carefully. Confident, practiced in front of mirrors and interview panels. She didn't recognize my name when I stood to greet her. Why would she? To Sean and his friends. I was always Tiffany, who runs a delivery company. Never Tiffany CEO, never Tiffany founder. Titles mattered, just not when they were mine. "So Samantha," I said once we were seated, "tell me about your trajectory since Goldman Sachs." She launched into it smoothly, as if she'd rehearsed the story dozens of times, looking for new challenges, exploring innovative environments, learning resilience through adversity. Every sentence sounded impressive until you listened too closely. The startups didn't work out, I asked gently. Market conditions weren't favorable, she said quickly. But I learned a lot about perseverance. Perseverance. I thought about her LinkedIn profile, the public activity log, showing application after application, over 200 of them. Perseverance indeed. And what interests you about logistics, I continued. She didn't hesitate. It's a growing field. Stable. Essential. Translation, I need a job and you're hiring. That was when I leaned back in my chair and changed everything. I don't think you're right for the operations manager role, I said. Her shoulders stiffened. I saw disappointment flicker before she masked it. I see. But I added, I do think you'd be an excellent executive assistant to the CEO. She blinked. Once. Twice. Assistant, she repeated. You'd manage my calendar. Coordinate meetings. Handle travel logistics. Sit in on high-level discussions. You'd get a front-row seat to how this company actually runs. I watched her pride wrestle with her reality. The salary I mentioned wasn't glamorous, but it was solid, more than unemployment, less than Wall Street fantasy. Her smile returned thinner this time. That sounds like a great learning opportunity, she said. It did, just not in the way she imagined. She accepted immediately. Can you start Monday, I asked. Yes, absolutely. She stood extending her hand. Thank you, Ms. Hart. We keep things professional but friendly here, I said, shaking it. You can call me Tiffany in private. At work, it's Ms. Hart or ma'am. She nodded quickly. Of course. What I didn't need to say, was that she'd soon be managing dinner reservations with the man who still spoke her name like a benchmark. Sean had no idea. He was too busy posting about manifesting growth and leveling up on social media, completely unaware that the woman he idolized was about to start scheduling my meetings and asking me if I preferred oat milk in my coffee. Samantha's first day was yesterday. She was competent, efficient, eager in the way people get when they're afraid of losing something they can't afford to give up. And when she read aloud from my calendar, Ms. Hart, you have dinner. Thursday at 8 with Ms. Rodriguez. That's my fiancé, I corrected calmly. Sean Chen. Please update it. She froze. Sean Chen, she asked, her voice barely steady. Yes, I said, looking up at her. You might know him. The color drained from her face. I smiled. By Thursday evening, the tension had settled into my chest, like something solid, heavy, unmoving, impossible to ignore. I didn't say anything to Sean about Samantha. I didn't hint. I didn't warn him. I simply told him I needed to stop by the office before dinner to grab a folder I'd forgotten. He sighed dramatically, already annoyed. Do we really have to? He asked. I don't love being around warehouses before a nice dinner. It won't take long, I said. 10 minutes. He rolled his eyes but agreed, smoothing his jacket, as if reminding himself that appearances mattered even in places he considered beneath him. We arrived just after 7:30. The executive floor was quiet. Lights dimmed, except for a few offices still occupied by people who cared more about finishing their work than being seen leaving early. As we stepped off the elevator, Sean wrinkled his nose. This place always smells like printer ink and ambition, he muttered. I didn't respond. Down the hall, Samantha was still at her desk. I'd asked her to stay late. Nothing unreasonable, just a few reports I wanted compiled by morning. She was typing quickly, shoulders tense, clearly eager to prove herself. Perfect timing. Samantha, I called out, my voice, calm, professional. Could you step away from your desk for a moment? She looked up and saw Sean. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Sean stopped walking. For half a second, none of us moved. Then recognition hit him hard and immediate. His confident posture collapsed inward like air rushing out of a punctured balloon. Samantha, he said, disbelief sharp in his voice. What are you? Samantha is my executive assistant, I said lightly, as if explaining a seating arrangement. She's been doing excellent work. Her badge hung from her neck, company logo unmistakable. Sean's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Tiffany, he said, slowly turning toward me. Why is my ex-girlfriend here? Wearing your company badge. I smiled. Because she works here. Samantha swallowed hard. Sean, she said, her voice barely audible. Samantha, I interrupted gently. Could you check whether the Marchetti contract is finalized for tomorrow morning? Yes, ma'am, she said quickly, almost tripping over her own words as she turned back toward her desk. Sean stared after her, stunned. Then his hand closed around my arm. We need to talk, now. Inside my office, the door barely closed before he exploded. You hired my ex, he snapped. As your assistant, are you out of your mind? I set my bag down slowly, deliberately. Is that a problem? You know exactly why it's a problem, he shot back. This is petty. This is humiliating. Humiliating for whom I asked. You told everyone she was ambitious, driven, going places. I needed someone with those qualities. His face flushed red. I was drunk. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it enough to say it, I replied. Publicly. More than once. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. This is insane, Tiffany. Make her quit. I can't do that, I said evenly. That would be illegal and unethical. She's my ex, he argued. She can't work here. She's an employee, I corrected. And she needs this job. That stopped him. What do you mean needs, he asked. I tilted my head. She didn't tell you? He stared at me. She's been unemployed for 8 months, I continued. Goldman let her go 2 years ago, performance issues. The startups after that all failed. She's been living with her parents. The words landed one by one, each heavier than the last. That's not true, he whispered. She told me she was consulting. I shrugged. People say a lot of things. He sank into the chair across from me, suddenly looking very small. The image he'd built, the ambitious ex, the standard he measured me against, cracked right in front of him. This is cruel, he said finally, his voice hollow. Cruel, I echoed. I gave a qualified woman a job when she needed one. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's worth asking why. Silence stretched between us. I can't go to dinner, he said abruptly, standing. I need space. That's fine, I replied. He left without another word. He didn't come home that night. I watched the office lights flicker off one by one. Samantha's desk the last to go dark, and realized something quietly, almost with relief. Whatever we had been building together had already collapsed. This was just the moment the rubble became visible. Sean didn't come home that night, or the next. Instead, my phone lit up with a call from his mother the following afternoon. I stared at the screen for a full 3 rings before answering, already bracing myself. Tiffany, Gloria Chen said sharply, skipping any pretense of politeness. What is this I'm hearing about you humiliating my son? I hired an employee, I replied calmly. If Sean feels humiliated by his ex-girlfriend having a normal job, that's not something I can fix. You did this to hurt him, she snapped. You're punishing him. I'm running a business, I said. Sean spent months comparing me to Samantha in front of other people. This is the reality of that comparison. She scoffed. This is abusive behavior. Publicly belittling your partner and holding an ex up as a standard is abusive behavior, I said evenly. Providing employment is not. She hung up on me. The next morning, Samantha stood in my doorway, pale and shaking. Ms. Hart, she said, voice trembling. I think it's best if I resign. I gestured for her to sit. She didn't. Sean contacted you, I said. She nodded. Last night. He said this job was destroying his life. And yours, I asked. Her shoulders slumped. I need this job. Yes, I said gently. You do. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten her. I just laid out the facts, her unemployment gap. The stability this role offered, the future growth she could have here. When I finished, she sat down heavily, eyes wet. You work for me, I said. Not him. She stayed. That decision detonated something in Sean. On Monday, he showed up at the office unannounced with Tanya Walker in tow. They marched past reception as if they owned the place. Samantha saw them first and tried to disappear into the supply room. I called her into my office immediately. Samantha, I said loudly enough for them to hear, please take notes for this meeting. Sean's face flushed deep red. We need to talk privately, he demanded. Samantha stays, I replied. Company policy. Tanya crossed her arms. This is psychological warfare. This is a workplace, I said. Samantha, please document their concerns. Samantha typed furiously, eyes glued to her screen. Sean's voice cracked. Baby, please, I love you. I made one mistake. Multiple, I corrected. Over months. He turned to Samantha. Tell her how messed up this is. She didn't look up. I just work here. That was the moment everything snapped. Sean lunged forward shouting, and security escorted both of them out. I asked Samantha to write an incident report. Then came the social media posts. Sean published a long emotional rant about narcissistic abuse and workplace harassment, tagging my company. My lawyer sent a cease and desist within 24 hours. The post disappeared, but the screenshots didn't. 2 days later, Gloria showed up at my condo, convincing the doorman she was surprising me for my birthday. It wasn't my birthday. You're destroying my son, she said, jabbing a finger at my chest. Your son destroyed our relationship, I replied. I ended the engagement this morning. I showed her the text. She tried to slap me. Missed. Hit the doorframe instead. The security camera caught everything. That night, Sean texted demanding the ring back. I didn't respond. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, messy, uneven, and increasingly desperate. Sean resurfaced 3 days after his social media post vanished, this time with a new strategy. He showed up in the lobby of my building with a man I didn't recognize loud enough that even the concierge looked uncomfortable. Samantha was the one who alerted me from upstairs. "Ms. Hart," she said quietly over the intercom, "Sean is downstairs. With someone else." I closed my laptop. "Stay where you are." By the time I reached the lobby, Sean was pacing, his voice sharp and performative. The man beside him, tall, overdressed, and trying too hard, had his arms slung possessively around Sean's shoulders. "This is my boyfriend, Austin," Sean announced when he saw me. "He's a crypto investor." Austin smirked. "You can't treat him like this. He has rights." "He has the right to leave," I said calmly. "He's trespassing." Sean laughed brittle and loud. "We're not leaving until you fire her, or I sue you for emotional distress." I didn't look at him. I turned to Samantha instead. "Samantha," I said evenly, "please call the police and report harassment and trespassing." Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, but she did it. The sound of dialing changed everything. Austin's confidence evaporated first. Sean's followed a second later, his face twisting as reality finally asserted itself. They left before the police arrived, but the report was filed anyway. After that, the unraveling accelerated. Austin disappeared within 2 weeks, vanished the moment Sean's money dried up, and the drama outweighed the bragging rights. Sean missed too many shifts at work, showed up drunk to a regional meeting, and was quietly terminated from his retail management role. His social media accounts went dark. No more affirmations. No more big moves. Last I heard through mutual friends, he'd moved back in with Gloria. Samantha, on the other hand, settled. Once the fear faded, something else emerged: competence without pretense. She stopped trying to impress. She did the work. She learned. She listened. One afternoon, she paused at my office door. "Can I be honest?" she asked. "Always." When I was with Sean, she said carefully, "he constantly compared me to other people, his friends, his cousins. Nothing was ever enough." I nodded. "Sounds familiar." She exhaled. Getting fired from Goldman was actually a relief. I just didn't know how to admit it. That was the first time I saw her clearly, not as a symbol, not as a mirror, but as a person. 2 weeks later, the ring arrived by FedEx. Sean tried to claim it was a gift. My lawyer reminded him that engagement rings are conditional gifts in this state. I sold it. The money went to a local job placement charity. It felt appropriate. It had been a month since Samantha started working for me, when the noise finally died down. No more surprise visits. No more angry voicemails from Gloria. No more vague threats disguised as emotional appeals. The legal paperwork was finished, the police report filed, and Sean was, at least for now, a closed chapter. My company, meanwhile, was thriving. The hospital network contract that Sean had waved off so dismissively turned into 2 more within weeks. Expansion plans moved from tentative discussions to scheduled meetings. We started hiring again, carefully, intentionally. Real growth, not the kind you hashtag. Samantha stayed. She kept her head down, did her work, and stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. One afternoon, after a long board meeting, she paused at my office door. "They're promoting me next month," she said quietly. "Operations role, not assistant." "You earned it," I replied. She nodded, then hesitated. "He'll probably lose his mind if he ever finds out." "He won't," I said. "He's blocked. Legally." She smiled small, relieved real, and left. As for me, I started seeing someone new. Michael Rivera from the hospital network we partnered with. He knew the entire story before our second date and laughed, not mockingly, but with clarity. "She told you who she was before you married her," he said. "That's not revenge. That's luck." Michael makes more than I do. And for the first time in my life, that fact didn't register as a threat, a comparison, or a failure. It was just information. Gloria still sends the occasional message, long, furious texts blaming me for Sean's downfall. I don't respond. Samantha forwards them to legal, where they're filed neatly under potential harassment. Someone asked me recently if I felt bad about any of it. I thought about the answer carefully. I gave an unemployed woman a stable job. I ran my company ethically. I refused to be shamed for building something real instead of flashy. And I walked away from a man who would never have valued what was right in front of him. No, I don't feel bad. The insult that started everything not ambitious enough turned out to be the clearest projection of all. Sean confused ambition with image, with titles, with proximity to people he could brag about. I was ambitious enough to build something tangible, ambitious enough to protect my boundaries, ambitious enough to choose respect over approval. Samantha is succeeding quietly. Sean is living loudly in someone else's basement. And I wake up every day knowing I didn't win by destroying anyone. I won by refusing to shrink. My name is Rebecca Smith. I'm 31 years old, and 3 months before my wedding, I discovered I was just a placeholder in the man I was supposed to marry's life. I didn't find out through a confession. There was no dramatic slip of the tongue, no suspicious lipstick stain, no late-night phone call. It was far quieter than that, more humiliating. The kind of truth that crawls under your skin and stays there burning slowly. It was a Tuesday night. Ordinary. Boring even. Robert Reeves, my fiancé, had left his phone on the coffee table while he showered. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. We weren't the kind of couple who snooped. Or at least that's what I thought we were. Then his phone buzzed. Not a full message, just a notification preview from a group chat. Girl, you're savage. Rebecca has no idea. Something about seeing my name like that made my stomach drop. I told myself it was nothing. A misunderstanding. But my hand moved anyway, picking up the phone before my brain could stop it. The chat was called Inner Circle Only. I didn't need to unlock anything. The previews were enough. Rebecca's sweet, but let's be real. She's just a placeholder. Her parents' money is paying for everything anyway. Once the wedding's over, I'll figure out my next move. My ex knows I'm not really over her. She's on a whole different level. My legs went weak. I scrolled through more notifications, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. There it was again, him talking about Lauren, his ex-girlfriend. The one he always told me was ancient history. The one he claimed meant nothing. She meant everything. I set the phone back exactly where I found it. My hands were shaking, but my face was calm. I walked into the kitchen, finished cooking dinner, and plated it neatly, like nothing inside me had just shattered. When Robert came out of the bathroom, he kissed my cheek, wrapped his arms around me, and launched into excited chatter about the wedding venue's seating charts flowers. I smiled. I nodded. I listened. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that every single wedding payment went through me. My parents had gifted us the money, yes. But the contracts, the transfers, the approvals, all mine. And in that moment, as Robert talked about forever with someone he never intended to stay with, I made a quiet decision. The wedding was set for September 15th. Today was September 13th. I finished my dinner, cleared my plate, and went to bed beside a man who had no idea his entire future was about to collapse carefully, legally, and completely. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. The strange thing about betrayal is how ordinary everything around it continues to feel. The world doesn't stop spinning just because your heart quietly recalibrates itself from love to strategy. The sun still rises. Coffee still tastes the same. And the man who reduced you to a temporary convenience still sleeps beside you, blissfully unaware that the countdown has already begun. For the next 48 hours, I became the version of myself. Robert expected the agreeable fiancé, the organized bride-to-be, the woman who smiled through stress and reassured everyone that everything was under control. And technically, it was. Just not in the way anyone assumed. Robert spent those days floating on excitement. He was riding the attention, the congratulations, the subtle shift in how people treated him now that he was about to marry well. He talked about future plans with an ease that almost impressed me, considering how disposable he clearly thought I was. He joked about the honeymoon. He teased me about being too serious. He called me his rock. I let him. Inside, though, I was cataloging everything, every word, every lie, every slip, where Lauren's name almost surfaced before he corrected himself. I thought about those messages constantly. Placeholder. Not a mistake. Not a joke. A role he had assigned me months before, proposing maybe even longer. The irony was almost poetic. Robert thought he was the one buying time. He had no idea I was doing the same. That afternoon, while he was out celebrating with friends, I sat at our dining table with my laptop open and my phone beside me. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I reviewed every contract calmly, like a professional closing a business deal instead of ending an engagement. The venue came first. A polite email, a confirmation number, a reminder of their 48-hour cancellation policy, full refund. The caterer was next, then the florist, the photographer, the DJ. One by one, the pillars holding up Robert's fantasy dissolved. Money flowed back into my account like a tide reversing itself, quiet and irreversible. The only losses were the cake deposit and my dress, both already paid, both non-refundable. A few $1,000s in exchange for clarity felt like a bargain. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the confirmation emails. There it was. Official. Final. No wedding. Robert texted me a photo from the bar. Can't believe we're almost married. I replied with a heart emoji. He had no idea that by the time he got home, he wouldn't be engaged anymore, only uninformed. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Not because I was at peace, but because I had taken back control. Whatever came next would be messy, loud, and public. I knew that. Robert was the kind of man who needed an audience for his downfall. I just hadn't told him yet. He walked through the door, late, tipsy, and smiling, wrapped me in his arms and whispered, 2 more days. I smiled into his shoulder and said nothing. Because he was right, just not the way he thought. The first scream came at 6:07 a.m. It wasn't loud in the traditional sense. No drawn-out shriek, no dramatic buildup. It was sharp, sudden, and raw, like a sound ripped out of someone before they had time to censor it. I opened my eyes slowly, already awake in my mind, long before my body decided to cooperate. Robert's phone was vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. He grabbed it groggily, squinting at the screen. "Who the hell is calling this early?" he muttered, irritation laced with sleep. I stayed still, quiet, observant. "Hello," he answered, his voice still thick. A pause. Then confusion. "What do you mean canceled?" I turned my head slightly, watching his face shift in real time. Confusion melted into disbelief, disbelief into panic. He sat upright, sheets tangling around his waist. "No, that's not possible," he said louder now. "There must be some mistake. The wedding is in 2 days." I could hear the muffled voice on the other end, professional, calm, unbothered. Someone who had already closed the file and moved on. Robert hung up and immediately dialed another number. Then another. Each call lasted less time than the last. With every hang-up, his breathing grew faster, his voice higher. Canceled, refunded, already rebooked. When he finally turned to look at me, his eyes were wild, like an animal cornered by a reality it didn't understand. "Rebecca," he said, shaking my shoulder. "Wake up. Something's wrong. Everything's gone. The venue, the caterer, everything." I sat up slowly and blinked at him deliberately. Calm. "What do you mean gone?" "They said it was canceled. All of it. Someone canceled our wedding." I met his gaze, held it, let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Oh," I said lightly. "That was me." The room went completely still. What he whispered. "I canceled the wedding," I repeated, reaching for my phone on the bedside table. 2 days ago. For a moment, he didn't react. His brain visibly struggled to process the words. Then his voice exploded. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted. "Do you know how many people are coming? My parents flew in. My coworkers took time off. This is insane." I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward him. Screenshot after screenshot filled the display messages. Timestamps his words, highlighted in merciless clarity. "She's just a placeholder. Lauren's on a different level. I'll upgrade eventually." His face drained of color. "You went through my phone," he said weakly, grasping for the wrong defense. "It was on the table," I replied. "The notifications showed everything. But interesting that that's what bothers you." He stammered, scrambling. "Those were jokes. Private conversations. You can't take those seriously." 3 months of jokes, I asked quietly. 3 months of planning your exit while letting my parents fund a wedding you never intended to honor. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You're twisting it," he said, desperation creeping in. "You're overreacting." I scrolled to one final message and read it aloud, my voice steady. "Rebecca's loyal, simple, and financially convenient." Robert flinched. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. "Everyone vents. That doesn't mean I don't love you." "Love doesn't require a backup plan," I replied. He tried everything after that. Tears first, then anger, then promises. At one point, he reached for me, tried to pull me into his arms like muscle memory alone could undo betrayal. I stepped back. "I want the ring," I said. His eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "Conditional gift," I said calmly. "Given in contemplation of marriage. No marriage. Ring comes back." His jaw tightened. Then, in a burst of fury, he yanked it off his finger and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. "Fine," he shouted. "Take it. This is exactly why you were just a placeholder anyway." There it was. The truth unfiltered and final. I bent down, picked up the ring, and slipped it into my pocket. "Thank you," I said softly. "That saved me years of doubt." He stormed out moments later, slamming the door so hard a framed photo from our engagement party crashed to the floor. The glass split straight down the center, our smiling faces fractured cleanly apart. Poetic, really. As I stood there, surrounded by the ruins of a wedding that would never happen, my phone began buzzing with calls from confused relatives and frantic vendors people about to learn the truth, whether Robert liked it or not. And I knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. Robert didn't waste time licking his wounds in private. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop, not with calls, but with notifications, mentions, tags, screenshots sent by friends who knew me well enough to recognize a storm forming before it hit. Robert had gone public. His first post was carefully crafted, the kind that sounds reasonable until you read it twice. He wrote about emotional instability, about how I had spiraled under pressure, how I had destroyed our future over insecurities. He didn't mention the texts. He didn't mention Lauren. He framed himself as the calm victim of a woman who couldn't handle commitment. Within minutes, the comments flooded in. People I barely knew offering sympathy. His friends talking about dodging a bullet. Strangers diagnosing me with issues they pulled out of thin air. A few of his ex-coworkers throwing around words like controlling and unstable. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was hurt, but because I was deciding how thorough to be. I didn't rush. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and organized everything into a neat folder. 3 months of screenshots, timestamps, intact names, visible context impossible to deny. I added the messages where he discussed using wedding gifts to furnish an apartment he planned to move into after leaving me. The ones where he calculated how long he'd need to stay married before divorcing me without looking like the bad guy. Then I posted. No commentary, no insults, just one sentence. Since my mental breakdown is being discussed publicly, here's what actually happened. The internet turned on him in under 10 minutes. People started asking questions he couldn't answer. Why was he calling his fiancée a placeholder? Why was he discussing another woman weeks before the wedding? Why was he planning a post-marriage exit strategy? His comment section became a digital crime scene. Then his sister called me screaming. "How dare you air private business online?" she yelled. "You mean the business Robert made public?" I replied calmly. "You don't get to control the narrative after you lie." She hung up. That afternoon, the legal threats arrived. An email from an attorney demanding compensation for emotional distress, lost wages from dealing with the cancellation, and a share of wedding expenses Robert had never paid a cent toward. My lawyer laughed when he read it. We responded with bank statements, screenshots, and the video I'd recorded Robert throwing the ring at my head in a fit of rage. State law was clear. No marriage, no ring, no payout. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. By evening, Robert's parents joined the assault. His father called, insisting we handle this like adults, which apparently meant I should quietly reinstate a wedding with a man who had already planned to leave me. When I refused, his tone turned cold, threatening. "You're making powerful enemies," he warned. "I really don't think I am," I said and hung up. The last blow came just before midnight. A message from one of Robert's friends, an accidental slip sent to the wrong person. Wait, what about Lauren? Wasn't she supposed to be at the reception after Rebecca left early? I stared at the screen, heart pounding not with pain but with disbelief. He hadn't just planned to leave me. He had planned to replace me at my own wedding. And suddenly everything made sense. The silence before had been unbearable. What came next would be loud, humiliating, and irreversible for him. I put my phone down, already knowing the next truth was about to surface. The thing about lies is that they rely on everyone playing their assigned roles. Once one person steps out of character, the whole performance collapses. Lauren was never supposed to become real. In Robert's version of events, she existed as an idea, a symbol of something better, shinier, more impressive than me. She was the woman he referenced in private messages to inflate his ego and justify his cowardice. The upgrade, the future, the proof that settling for me was temporary. Except Lauren was very real, and she was nothing like the fantasy he had sold to himself. I didn't have to go looking for the truth. It came to me carried by the same loose mouths that had helped expose everything else. One of Robert's coworkers reached out cautiously at first, then with growing urgency. Apparently, Lauren had been mentioned more than once at the office, not by name, but by implication. The woman he should have ended up with, the one who got away. The problem was that this coworker actually knew her. Lauren wasn't single. She wasn't waiting. She wasn't even interested in Robert the way he thought she was. She was married to a man who had no idea his wife's name was being used as a placeholder in someone else's escape plan. And that wasn't even the worst part. Lauren had been entertaining Robert's attention because it fed something in her, not because she intended to leave her marriage. The late-night texts, the flirty comments, the careful ambiguity. She let him believe there was a future because it was convenient, familiar, safe. He had been the backup. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so sad. Robert found out the same way I had by accident. He went to her for comfort after everything imploded, looking for reassurance, validation, a place to land. Instead, her husband answered her phone. The meltdown that followed was spectacular. He texted me paragraph after paragraph, swinging wildly between rage and despair. She lied to me. She's married. You ruined everything. If you hadn't canceled the wedding, I wouldn't have needed her. I read every word without responding. For the first time since this all began, Robert wasn't in control of anything. Not his image, not his future, not even his narrative. The woman he had elevated above me was never coming. The life he had planned to step into didn't exist. And when the truth reached his workplace, the consequences followed quickly. Robert had told people he was marrying into stability, into connections, into opportunity. He had implied more than once that doors would open for him once he was officially family. When the wedding evaporated and the screenshots circulated, questions started forming. Then concerns, then meetings. He wasn't fired, but he was exposed, demoted, quietly reassigned. The unspoken message was clear: trust had been broken. That same week, he tried to escalate things again. He contacted my employer, claiming I was unstable, erratic, emotionally dangerous. My boss called me into his office, concerned but calm. I showed him everything. He read it all, sighed, and said one sentence I'll never forget. You didn't overreact. You got out. Robert didn't stop there. He showed up at my apartment while I was at work, insisting he lived there, demanding to be let in. Building security disagreed. They called me. I said the truth. He was escorted out and warned not to return. By then, the wedding day was only hours away. The day that was supposed to mark the beginning of a life he never intended to keep. And I knew deep in my bones that Robert wasn't finished humiliating himself yet. Because people like him never know when to stop. The house was loud in the best way possible. Poker chips clicked across the table. Bottles clinked. Someone laughed too hard at a joke that wasn't even that funny. My friends filled the living room with warmth, noise, and a strange kind of relief, as if we were all collectively exhaling after holding our breath for months. It was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, it was a Saturday afternoon surrounded by people who actually cared whether I was respected. At exactly 2:03 p.m., the doorbell rang. The room went quiet. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know it was him. Some instincts don't require confirmation. I opened the door anyway. Robert stood there in a full suit, tailored, pressed, expensive. His hair was styled, his shoes polished. In his hand, he held a bouquet of white flowers, already wilting slightly at the edges. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled, shaky and forced. It's our wedding day, he said, like that fact alone could reset reality. I'm here. Let's go. I stared at him, taking in the audacity, the denial, the sheer refusal to accept consequences. Robert, I said evenly, there is no wedding. We can still fix this, he insisted, stepping closer. We don't need the venue. We'll go to City Hall. We'll do something small. You owe me that. Owe you, I repeated. His voice cracked. 300 people are expecting us. I'm humiliated. I showed up to work in a suit on Friday because everyone threw me a party. Gifts, speeches. I can't go back unmarried. And there it was. Not love, not regret. Image. You want to marry me? I said slowly, so you don't have to explain yourself. He nodded, desperate now. We can divorce later. I'll sign a prenup. Anything. I just need today. Behind me, someone whispered, is he serious? Robert took another step forward. I stepped back and closed the door halfway between us. No, I said, you need to leave. He shook his head and planted his feet. I'm not going anywhere. So I closed the door completely. He stayed. For 3 hours. Robert sat on my doorstep in his suit bouquet, abandoned on the concrete, alternating between begging, crying, and yelling at anyone who walked by. Neighbors slowed down. Phones came out. Someone eventually called the police, concerned about a man in formal wear having what looked like a breakdown. When the officers arrived, Robert told them I was holding his belongings hostage, that he lived there, that I was unstable. I showed them the lease, my ID, the messages, the security footage from earlier in the week. They asked him to leave. As he was escorted away, he turned and screamed, "You'll regret this. No one will ever love you like I did." One of my friends shouted back, "That's the point." The door closed. The room erupted into laughter, then quiet, then something softer, relief. The wedding day ended with cards on the table, beer in hand, and the cake I'd never planned to eat sliced into generous portions. It tasted incredible. But even as the night wound down, I knew this wasn't over yet. Consequences were still catching up to Robert, and they were moving fast. 3 weeks after the wedding that never happened, the noise finally started to fade. Not all at once, not cleanly, but steadily, like the aftermath of a storm when the debris stops flying and you're left to assess what's still standing. Robert's life unraveled in quiet, humiliating increments. At work, the demotion he tried to downplay became impossible to ignore. He had promised people things he couldn't deliver: connections, opportunities, a future built on a marriage that never existed. When the screenshots surfaced and questions followed, management didn't need to fire him. The trust was gone. The authority evaporated. He quit a week later, citing mental health reasons, which would have been ironic if it weren't so predictable. Lauren's situation imploded too. Her husband didn't just discover Robert, he uncovered a pattern. Other men, other lies. Divorce papers followed quickly. And suddenly the woman Robert had built his fantasy around was fighting for her own survival. He tried calling me once after that, saying he just needed someone who understood. I blocked the number without responding. His family's threats amounted to nothing. After consulting a real attorney, not a friend who knew law, they were told there was no case, no leverage, no money coming back. A long email about honor and family arrived in my inbox. I deleted it without reading past the first line. The friend group that had once cheered Robert on turned inward. Blame bounced around until the group chat collapsed entirely. One woman reached out privately to apologize, admitting she hadn't realized how calculated it all was. Another confessed they'd known Robert planned to leave eventually. I thanked them for the honesty and declined further conversation. I didn't need closure from people who had watched disrespect and called it entertainment. My parents were my anchor through all of it. When Robert's father tried to badmouth me at a mutual social gathering, my dad stood up in the middle of the room and said calmly and loudly, "My daughter didn't lose a wedding. She avoided a lifetime of being used." Then he announced the money we'd saved would go toward something that actually mattered. That money became my turning point. I used it to finally launch the consulting firm I'd talked about for years, an idea Robert had always dismissed as too risky, too unnecessary. Turns out he just preferred me predictable, small, convenient. The ring, I sold it. Used part of the money to take a solo trip I'd always wanted, but was told was impractical. I posted photos of myself smiling, not the forced kind, but the quiet content kind. Robert commented once, "Must be nice spending our wedding money on yourself." I replied, "There was no wedding." He deleted the comment. The last time I heard about him, he was living with a relative, telling anyone who would listen that I'd ruined his life over a misunderstanding. He started a blog about surviving emotional abuse. It had 12 followers. I wish I could say I felt vindicated. What I felt was lighter. I'm dating again, not rushing. Not performing, not proving anything. The man I'm seeing knows the whole story. He didn't flinch. He said something simple that stuck with me. "I like that you didn't stay where you weren't valued." That's the real ending. Not the canceled wedding. Not the public fallout. Not the humiliation or the revenge or the cake we ate during poker night. The real ending was this. I stopped auditioning for a role I never agreed to play. I refused to be someone's placeholder. I chose self-respect over saving face, truth over comfort. And in doing so, I made room for a life that doesn't require pretending. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some doors are better left closed. And some weddings are best never attended at all. My name is Lydia Jackson, and I was 37 years old when I learned that silence can be louder than confrontation. The text came in at 2:14 p.m. on a Thursday, right in the middle of a workday that had been painfully ordinary until that moment. I was reviewing reports, half listening to a conference call, when my phone vibrated on the desk beside me. I glanced down, expecting something forgettable. Instead, it was from Lucas, my boyfriend of 6 years. "You won't believe this. Ran into Madison here. Small world, huh?" Don't be weird about it. Madison, his ex-girlfriend. The woman he'd sworn was ancient history. The woman who somehow still reacted to every photo he posted. The woman I had asked calmly, reasonably, to be kept out of our lives. Lucas was supposed to be on a men's wellness weekend at a luxury resort 2 hours north of the city. Golf, spa treatments, a break from work stress with his friends. That was the story. That was the plan. I stared at the message longer than I cared to admit. There was no apology in it, no explanation, just a preemptive warning not to question it. I typed back exactly 3 words. "Have fun." No emoji, no follow-up. Then I locked my phone, excused myself from the meeting, and walked into my office with a clarity that felt strangely calm. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I didn't demand answers. I called my attorney. Richard Weiss said when he picked up, "I need a private investigator. Today." There was a pause on the line. "What's going on?" My boyfriend just told me he randomly ran into his ex-girlfriend at a resort he's supposedly attending with friends. I don't believe in coincidences. Neither did Richard. Give me an hour. 45 minutes later, he called back. I've got someone. Her name is Diane. Former federal investigator. She's excellent and expensive. I don't care. She can be on site by 6. Where is Lucas? I checked the location sharing he'd insisted on years ago, back when transparency was still something he pretended to value. The resort glowed on the map like a warning sign. Richard exhaled slowly. She'll text you directly, and Lydia, prepare yourself. You might not like what she finds. I already don't. Lucas called that night around 8. Hey, babe, he said easily. How was your day? Fine. How's work? Busy. He launched into a casual monologue about hot stone massages and overpriced drinks about how relaxing everything was. Then, as if remembering something insignificant, oh yeah, Madison's here with a couple friends. We grabbed a drink earlier. Isn't that wild? Wild. That was his word. You're not mad, are you? He asked. No, I said truthfully. Enjoy your weekend. He hung up satisfied. 5 minutes later, a message came through from an unknown number. This is Diane. I'm in position. Subject observed. Dining at resort restaurant with female matching Madison's description. We'll update every 6 hours unless something significant occurs. I sat alone in my office, staring at the message, feeling something inside me quietly shut a door. I didn't know yet how bad it would get, but I knew with absolute certainty that the story Lucas was telling me was already over. I slept less than 3 hours that night. Not because I was spiraling, not because I was crying, but because my mind had shifted into a mode I didn't recognize until later observation. Cold, alert, waiting. At 6:23 a.m. Friday, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Diane, update 1. Subject and female companion observed having breakfast together at resort restaurant. No additional parties present. Attached were photos. Lucas sat across from Madison at a small table by the window, sunlight pouring in like it was a vacation commercial. No friends, no group. Just the two of them leaning toward each other, close enough that the body language didn't need interpretation. I stared at the images longer than I should have, then set the phone face down. Breakfast could be explained away. Coincidences could still be weaponized. At 9:41 a.m., another update arrived. Subjects observed entering spa wing together. Door signage indicates couples retreat package. This time the photos showed the door clearly. Couples retreat. Black lettering, gold trim, no ambiguity. My chest tightened, not in pain, but in confirmation. At 12:08 p.m., Diane sent more. Lunch on a private balcony. Wine glasses. Madison's hand resting casually over Lucas's wrist, as if it had always belonged there. At 3:17 p.m., another message. Subjects observed walking resort grounds. Male subject's arm around female's waist. That was the moment something inside me went completely still. At 5:44 p.m., the photo that ended any remaining doubt arrived. Lucas and Madison at the elevator, keycard visible, room number visible. The room was registered to Lucas. At 9:51 p.m., Diane sent the final image of the day. Madison leaving the room. Different clothes. Hair loose, slightly disheveled. Her posture relaxed in a way people don't get unless they've been comfortable somewhere for a while. 4 hours. I sat on the edge of my bed phone in my hands, feeling strangely detached, as if this were footage from someone else's life. Someone less careful. Someone less prepared. Diane called around 10. How much longer do you want me on this? She asked. Through Sunday, I said. Everything. You got it. Saturday was worse. Not because the acts escalated, but because the lie crystallized. Breakfast together again. Spa treatments booked back to back. Lunch. Poolside lounging. Dinner. They moved like a couple that had already decided what they were. In between updates, I did my own investigation. I checked Ryan's Instagram, one of the friends Lucas had claimed was on the trip. He was at a backyard barbecue in another city, posted at 2:03 p.m., Saturday. I checked Ethan's story. At his sister's engagement party. Toasting champagne. Time-stamped. None of them were at the resort. The men's weekend never existed. It had been a cover. That night, Lucas texted me. Missing you so much. This weekend has been exactly what I needed. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I replied, drive safe. Sunday morning, Diane sent the final batch. Lucas and Madison at breakfast one last time, a long embrace in the parking lot, and then the kiss. Not a quick one, not a goodbye peck. A lingering kiss, the kind that assumes continuation. Madison walked away smiling. Lucas got into his car and left. Diane called minutes later. That's everything she said. I'll compile the report and send it to your attorney. What's the total? I asked. $3,400. Send the invoice to Richard. Lucas pulled into the driveway around 4 p.m., relaxed, smiling, sun-kissed. He wrapped his arms around me like nothing had changed. "I missed you," he said. "How was it?" I asked. "Incredible," he replied. "Exactly what I needed. I feel recharged." I smiled back. "Good," I said. "How was your weekend?" "Productive." He didn't notice my tone. He went upstairs to unpack, talking about massages and meals and how refreshing it had all been. He never mentioned Madison. Not once. And that was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. And I was done pretending otherwise. Monday morning arrived like any other, which felt almost offensive given how completely my life had shifted. Lucas woke up early, kissed my forehead, and left for work like a man with nothing to hide. He texted me a heart emoji from the road, asked what I wanted for dinner, mentioned how relaxed he felt after the weekend, how he was finally clear-headed again. Clear-headed. I watched him move through the house that morning, comfortable, confident, unaware that every step he took was on ground that no longer belonged to him. At 9:12 a.m., Richard called. "I've got Diane's full report," he said. "It's airtight. Photos, timestamps, corroboration from hotel staff. There's no ambiguity." "Good." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm very clear," I said, and I meant it. We discussed next steps clinically. Documentation, property, financial exposure, no dramatics, no emotion, just strategy. "I suggest we confront him in my office," Richard said. "Neutral ground. Papers ready." When I asked, "Wednesday gives us time to prepare." Tuesday night, I made dinner like I always did. Lucas sat across from me, laughing, relaxed, telling me about a project at work. He looked lighter, happier, as if shedding guilt had freed him. At one point, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You seem quiet," he said. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I replied. He nodded, satisfied with the answer. People believe what they want when it's convenient. After dinner, casually, as if it were nothing. "Hey, I said Richard wants us to come by his office tomorrow. Something about updating documents, estate planning stuff." "Oh," Lucas said easily. "Sure. What time?" 4. "Works for me. I'm off early anyway." Wednesday afternoon, we walked into Richard's conference room together. There was another attorney present, a woman Lucas didn't recognize. His steps slowed. "What's this?" he asked, glancing between us. Richard gestured to the woman. "This is Angela Morales. She's here to represent you." Lucas laughed once, uncertain. "Represent me for what?" I slid the folder across the table. "Open it." His smile faded as he flipped the pages. First page, petition for dissolution of domestic partnership. Second page, a full-color photograph of him and Madison kissing in the resort parking lot. His face drained of color. "What is this?" he whispered. "Documentation," I said. "Of your weekend." He flipped faster. Breakfasts, spa room entry, balcony lunches, hotel room timestamps. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. "You had me followed." "You lied," I said calmly. "You planned a trip with your ex-girlfriend and told me it was something else." "That's insane," he snapped suddenly. "That's psychotic. You invaded my privacy." "You committed infidelity," I replied. "That ends things." Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Collins, I strongly suggest you consult with Ms. Morales or retain your own counsel. These are legitimate grounds." Lucas looked at me like he didn't recognize me. "You're serious," he said. "Already filed," I answered. "You have 30 days to respond." "What about the house?" he demanded. "Our accounts." "That's what the process is for." His voice cracked. "We've been together 6 years." "And you spent 3 days with your ex-girlfriend in a hotel," I said. "We're done." "We didn't sleep together," he insisted. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Time-stamped photos. 5:44 p.m. Entering his room. 9:51 p.m. Leaving. 4 hours. "You expect me to believe nothing happened?" I asked. He had no answer. "I'll stay at a hotel tonight," I said, standing. "You can remain at the house for now. Everything else goes through attorneys." I walked out without looking back. That night he called 37 times. Texted more than 80. I blocked him after the 10th message. And for the first time since that text on Thursday, I slept. The retaliation didn't start quietly. It exploded. By Friday morning, Richard was already shaking his head when he called me. He hired counsel, he said. Name's Mitchell Reeves. Known for aggressive tactics. Likes intimidation letters. "Let me guess," I said. "I'm controlling. Invasive. Emotionally abusive." Richard let out a dry laugh, word for word. Mitchell's first move was a formal letter claiming the private investigator's work constituted illegal surveillance and violated Lucas's reasonable expectation of privacy. He demanded the evidence be excluded and threatened countersuits for emotional distress. Richard didn't even pause. The PI photographed him in public spaces, he said calmly. Resort restaurants, balconies, Parking lots, hallways, nothing illegal. This is posturing. So what's the real play, I asked. He's trying to scare you into settling. Standard move. But Mitchell wasn't done. 3 days later, he filed an emergency motion requesting temporary spousal-style support, exclusive use of the house, and a freeze on shared accounts, arguing that Lucas was emotionally destabilized by my actions and needed financial protection. I stared at the filing on my screen. He cheated, I said flatly, and now he's asking for support. He's fishing, Richard replied. We'll counter with the evidence. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, Lucas's family launched their campaign. His mother called my parents first. Your daughter is destroying my son, she said. She's vindictive. She humiliated him. My mother called me 20 minutes later, confused and shaken. What's going on, she asked. She says you spied on him. He cheated, I said. I have proof, all of it. That's not what she said. She wouldn't tell you that. Ask her where Lucas's friends were that weekend. Ask her why none of them were at the resort. My mother checked. She called back quietly. I see photos of Ryan at a barbecue, Ethan at a party, Lydia. Were you lied to about the whole trip? Yes, I said. It was planned. He went to meet Madison. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Then Lucas's sister started texting me. You're ruining his life over one mistake. 6 years thrown away over nothing. Madison meant nothing. It was closure. Closure, I typed back. Takes an afternoon. Not 3 days in a hotel room. There was a long pause. Then he told me you knew and were fine with it. You knew enough to lie, I replied. I blocked her. The emergency hearing arrived on a Wednesday morning. Lucas showed up with Mitchell, his mother, and his sister, all dressed in dark colors, faces somber, as if grief could substitute for truth. Mitchell stood first. Your Honor, he said. My client was subjected to invasive, psychologically damaging surveillance by his partner. He's suffering severe emotional distress and requires financial support during recovery from this trauma. Trauma. Richard stood slowly. Your Honor, he said evenly. Mr. Collins engaged in a multi-day affair with his ex-girlfriend. He planned the encounter, lied about his whereabouts, and concealed the truth until confronted with irrefutable evidence. He handed the judge a tablet, photos, timestamps, staff statements confirming they were seen together constantly. The judge scrolled silently. His expression hardened. Mr. Reeves, the judge, said your client's extramarital conduct is thoroughly documented. I'm denying the emergency motion. Both parties will maintain separate residences and existing financial arrangements until final settlement. Lucas's shoulders sagged. Outside the courtroom, his mother cornered me. You've always been controlling, she snapped. He told me how you isolated him. I didn't isolate anyone, I said calmly. He had complete freedom. He used it to cheat. He made a mistake. He made a plan, I replied. Those are different things. Mitchell interrupted smoothly. My client is still open to negotiation. If you drop the infidelity claim, we can proceed no fault. No, I said, we proceed with the truth. Lucas appeared then, eyes red, voice shaky. Can we talk, he asked. Just 5 minutes. No. I love you, he said desperately. We can fix this. You planned this, I said. You lied to me, your family, your friends. That's not something I fix. I walked away while he cried behind me. That night he escalated. I came home to change locks and a text. I need space. Don't come back. I called Richard immediately. He locked me out. He can't do that, Richard said. File a report. The police arrived within the hour. The officer turned to Lucas. This is jointly occupied property. You can't exclude her. But he moved out, Lucas said quickly. She left temporarily, the officer replied. Change the locks back. I declined the escort. The next morning I hired a locksmith. Changed them myself. Gave Richard a copy of the new key. Lucas was furious. You can't just change the locks, he yelled over the phone. Our locks, I corrected. Same rules. This is harassment. This is me protecting my legal rights. He hung up. 3 days later, he hit the credit cards. Almost $10,000 charged in 72 hours, electronics, furniture, designer items. Richard filed contempt. At the next hearing, the judge didn't hide his irritation. Mr. Collins, he said, did you charge approximately $10,000 to joint accounts in the last week? Lucas hesitated. I needed yes or no. Yes. Return the items or reimburse half within 14 days. Lucas had to write a check. And that's when he made his worst decision. 2 weeks later, I got a call from HR. We received a complaint, the woman said carefully. Allegations of domestic abuse. My stomach dropped. From who? Lucas Collins. I hadn't seen him in over a month. He's lying, I said. This is retaliation. We have to investigate, she replied. You're on administrative leave pending review. I called Richard the second the line disconnected. He just accused me of abuse, I said. There was a pause. Then Richard said quietly, "Good. If he's lying, this will destroy him." And I believed him. The investigation took 14 days. 14 days of silence from work. 14 days of waiting while my reputation hung in the balance because someone I once loved decided truth was optional. HR requested everything. My calendar, my location data, my badge records, my credit card statements. Richard went further. He subpoenaed Lucas's phone records, demanded timestamps on the photos Lucas submitted, and pulled my gym check-ins, parking receipts, and rideshare history. People who lie emotionally, Richard told me, usually lie sloppily. He was right. Every single incident Lucas claimed had a timestamp, and every single one placed me somewhere else. One alleged incident was supposed to have happened on a Tuesday night at 8:00 p.m. At that exact time, I was at a work dinner with 12 colleagues. There were photos, receipts, calendar invites, witnesses. Another was claimed for a Saturday afternoon. I was 3 hours away at my sister's house. Her doorbell camera captured me arriving at 1:04 p.m. and leaving at 6:52 p.m. The final accusation, a weekday morning. I was at the gym, logged in, logged out, on camera. HR cleared me. The email was short and devastating in the way only official language can be. The allegations made against you were found to be unsubstantiated and inconsistent with documented evidence. You are reinstated effective immediately with full back pay. Richard didn't waste a second. He filed a motion outlining Lucas's pattern of behavior, lock changes, asset dissipation, false allegations intended to cause professional harm. Mitchell tried to argue that Lucas was acting out of emotional trauma. The judge cut him off. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "I've reviewed the documentation. Your client's allegations are not credible. This conduct reflects poorly on his claims in these proceedings." Lucas didn't look at me. By month 8, Mitchell was still filing continuance requests, delaying, dragging, hoping exhaustion would get him what facts couldn't. Finally, the mediation date stuck. Mitchell arrived aggressive. "My client seeks 65% of shared assets," he announced, 3 years of monthly support and reimbursement for therapy costs related to emotional distress. Richard didn't blink. "Your client committed infidelity," he said evenly, "planned and concealed it, filed false allegations, maxed out joint accounts. He's lucky to walk away with half." The mediator agreed. Final settlement. House sold. Proceeds split 50-50. Shared retirement divided proportionally. My loss $51,000. Each kept their own vehicles. Lucas repaid the credit card debt he incurred. No support awarded. Each party paid their own legal fees. Mitchell made one last attempt. "Your Honor," he said, "the surveillance caused my client severe psychological trauma. He's been in therapy." The judge raised a hand. "Your client's distress stems from his own actions being documented," she said, "not from the documentation itself." Decision finalized. Outside the courtroom, Lucas tried to approach me. Mitchell blocked him. Lucas stepped around anyway. "I hope you're happy," he said bitterly. "You destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied. "You did when you planned that weekend. It was one mistake." "It was 3 days of lies," I said. "That's not a mistake." "I loved you." "You loved stability," I replied, "not honesty." His mother jumped in. "She's right," she snapped. "You're cruel." "I'm thorough," I said. "There's a difference." I walked away. That night, Richard took me out for a drink. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," I admitted, "but lighter." "You lost about $51,000 in retirement plus legal fees." "Worth it," I said without hesitation. He raised his glass. "To documentation," he said. I clinked mine against it. And that was when Richard mentioned something he'd just received from Diane. "Oh," he said casually. "One more thing. Your ex and Madison." They'd been planning that weekend for 2 months. Text records showed they'd been talking about finally being together. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Let me guess," I said. "It didn't work out." "Not exactly," Richard replied. "She ghosted him 3 weeks later." I froze. "She what?" "Completely cut contact," he said. "Turns out she was engaged. The weekend was her closure before her wedding." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. He went on. "Married 5 months after your separation started. Baby on the way already." I stared at my drink. Lucas had burned his life down for a woman who never intended to stay. That wasn't revenge. That was consequence. The fallout didn't explode. It settled. Quietly, slowly, like ash after something has already burned itself out. By the time the paperwork was finalized, 9 months had passed since that Thursday afternoon text. 9 months since the moment I chose documentation over denial. Life didn't dramatically improve overnight. It simplified. I sold the house we'd once talked about renovating together. Watching the for sale sign go up felt strangely neutral, not sad, not relieving. Just final. The proceeds landed in my account, and with them came the first real sense of closure. Not emotional, practical. Lucas moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances who didn't know what to say to me anymore, who offered updates like apologies. He was still working the same job, still telling people his version of events, still insisting he'd been pushed into everything that happened. Madison married her fiancé in late spring. I saw the photos accidentally, someone else's story, someone else's celebration. She looked radiant, pregnant, unbothered. She never once acknowledged what she'd done. Why would she? For her, that weekend had been a footnote, a goodbye she needed, a favor she took. Lucas had been the one who mistook it for meaning. The irony wasn't lost on me. About 6 months after everything ended, Lucas's sister emailed me. Not a text, an email. She apologized, said she'd been manipulated, that Lucas had downplayed everything that she hadn't wanted to believe he could lie so easily. We weren't close after that, but we weren't enemies either. Distance, I learned, can be its own form of peace. Lucas's mother never apologized. She still tells anyone who will listen that I'm cold, calculated, cruel. I don't correct her. People who want villains don't care about timelines or evidence. Work stabilized, then improved. The HR investigation ended up working in my favor. My department head quietly acknowledged how professionally I'd handled everything. 2 months later, I was promoted. Better title, better salary, better boundaries. I bought a smaller townhouse. 2 bedrooms, sunlight in the kitchen, no rooms full of memories that didn't belong to me anymore. And then 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I went on a date. His name was Daniel. Divorced, calm, direct, no performative charm. On our second date, I told him everything, not dramatically, just factually. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he shook his head once and said, "That must have been terrifying." Not dramatic, not judgmental, just accurate. We moved slowly after that, carefully, honestly. 7 months post-divorce. I ran into Lucas at a coffee shop. He looked thinner, tired. We exchanged polite hellos, nothing more. His sister excused herself awkwardly when she realized who I was. "You look good," he said. "So do you," I replied. It wasn't true, but it wasn't a lie I needed to argue with. He hesitated. "I'm sorry, for everything. I destroyed something good." "Yes," I said, "you did." He nodded, eyes glossy. "Do you think you will ever forgive me?" "Eventually," I said, "but we're not getting back together." "I know," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know I regret it." "I believe you," I said, and for the first time I meant it. As he walked away, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no grief. Just absence. That's how I knew it was truly over. There was no grand revenge, no dramatic victory. There was evidence, process, and consequence. Lucas wanted closure with his ex-girlfriend. He got it, and lost everything else in the process. That wasn't cruelty. That was simply how truth works when it's finally allowed to speak. By the time everything settled, I had done the math so many times it almost felt ritualistic. $3,400 for the private investigator. $9,500 in legal fees. $51,000 lost in retirement during the asset split. Roughly $74,000. People love to ask that question, the one that assumes bitterness. Was it worth it? Yes. Not because I won, not because Lucas lost, but because I didn't spend the rest of my life wondering what was real. I didn't spend years second-guessing my instincts or rewriting history in my head to make someone else's lies easier to live with. What ended my relationship wasn't revenge. It was documentation. A camera. Timestamps. The legal process doing exactly what it's supposed to do when someone lies and keeps lying. Lucas didn't collapse because I exposed him. He collapsed because he gambled everything on deception and assumed I would stay silent. He wanted closure with Madison. He got it and learned afterward that she'd been engaged the entire time, that the weekend he torched his life for had been nothing more than her goodbye ritual, her emotional loose end. She blocked him completely 3 weeks later. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement. She married her fiancé 5 months after our separation began, had a baby not long after. Lucas found out the same way I did through Instagram. I heard he sent her a congratulatory message. She never responded. That part wasn't satisfying. It was sobering, because it made one thing painfully clear. He hadn't been chosen. He'd been used. And he'd thrown away a stable, honest life for the illusion of being wanted. As for me, I live in a home that's easy to maintain and impossible to lie in. I sleep without wondering who's texting whom when I'm not looking. I don't check phones. I don't police friendships. I don't need to. Daniel and I still move carefully, deliberately. We talk about boundaries before we cross them. We don't joke about don't be jealous. We don't normalize disrespect as humor. Trust I've learned isn't blind. It's earned and protected. The last time I saw Lucas months after that coffee shop encounter, he looked through me rather than at me, like someone trying to recognize a life they no longer have access to. I didn't feel powerful. I felt free. The story people tell about revenge is wrong. Real consequences aren't loud. They aren't theatrical. They don't end with someone on their knees begging. They end quietly, with paperwork, with evidence, with the truth standing where the lies used to be. Lucas planned a weekend with his ex-girlfriend while telling me he loved me. I documented it. He tried to rewrite the narrative. The facts didn't cooperate. That wasn't revenge. That was accountability. And it cost exactly what it was worth.